Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Perira. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday said that measures including demonetization, GST rollout and emphasis on Aadhaar taken by his government were effective steps against corruption. Speaking at the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit in Delhi, the Prime Minister said that he was ready to pay a political price for combating graft in the country. The Prime Minister also said that demonetization brought large parts of the underground economy into the formal system and added that post-demonetization, there is a behavioral change among citizens. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze if economic reforms come at a political price. Joining me on the program today are Lalitha Kumaramangalam of the BJP, Ajay, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director of the Business Standard. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to start with the lady first on the program. Mr. Mangalam, what do you think prompted the Prime Minister to say what he said at the summit, at the HC summit yesterday? And also, do economic reforms come in the way of politics?
I wouldn't say they generally come in the way of politics, but perhaps in today's milieu, one does or one may have to pay a short-term price for what could be seen as changes. I don't think, quite frankly, that, I think the reason why he made that statement, which was the first thing you asked me, was because of this whole hoo-ha generally, whether it's in the media or outside, etc., where everybody said that demonetization is nonsense and etc., etc. But then you've had two things. The GDP figures were out, which show that there is a slight increase from the last time. And today we've swept UP. So while the pundits may have a lot to say, ultimately it's the common man that votes in this country. I think the Prime Minister was also trying to tell his detractors that it's not just politics that has brought me here, but also the intention of making good on the promises that he made when he was voted into power.
Sure. Mr. Manishankar Iyer of the, former MP of the Congress joins us on the program as well right now. Thank you for joining us. As far as the Prime Minister's comment on, paying a political price, or he's ready to pay a political price as far as corruption is concerned, what do you think prompted him to say that? And do you believe that the Prime Minister is worried about something and that's why he said that?
Well, it's self-evident from the words that he has used that he is panicking. And I think he shows great political perspicacity in panicking because the country is getting extremely worried about the consequences of not his economic policy, but of the eccentricities of his economic policy. And the manner in which the economy has been handled for the past few months, well, for over a year, decisions which no economist would consider appropriate being taken, therefore a political price having to be paid, and he realizes that he is going to have to pay a political price. Therefore says he's ready to take it on now. If a man says that I make mistakes, that I'm ready to take the consequences.
But Mr. Iyer, there are no
the only consequence he deserves is to be kicked out of office.
There are no indications that prove that very fact, because the BJP seems to be winning election after election. Even today, we've seen them sweep the UP civic polls.
Well, they can, if they are winning election after election, and they expect to win election after election, then what is the political price that he says he's ready to pay? Either he actually anticipates a political problem in consequence of his economic decisions, or he doesn't anticipate political problems. And if he doesn't anticipate political problems, then what is this political price he's talking about?
Okay.
It's all jazzy. There is no sensible, thought-out plan of action. And from time to time, he thinks that by quite clever twists of phrase, he'll be able to prevail over people's thinking abilities. People who are voters are not animals. They are thinking human beings, and they will take their decisions as they take them, and we'll see what happens as it goes along.
Okay, fair enough. Let me bring in Mr. Bhattacharya into the picture. Mr. Bhattacharya, is there anything that points towards a direction to show that the BJP is on the back foot right now, and that's why the Prime Minister said what he had to say?
Well, I'm a little puzzled by that statement of the Prime Minister. To me, there are economic policy decisions and there are economic reforms. Now, either whether economic policy decisions or their economic reforms, whenever anybody takes those decisions, the political price is paid subject to the way you execute those decisions or implement those reforms. So if the Prime Minister is referring to some political price to be paid, then I would imagine that my question would be, is it an indirect admission that he sees that the way it was implemented, both in the case of if demonetization is indeed a reform, whether there was the way it was rolled out was a problem, or whether even in the goods and services tax, which was a great piece of reform in my view, but with a lot of glitches. So is he talking about the political price because of good reform being implemented badly, or good reform? So in my view, a good reform in itself will actually benefit the people, benefit society, benefit the economy. And if there are any short-term adverse consequences, these are easily manageable. So I'm a little puzzled. I'm still not been able to really fathom the real political import of it, or was it buying insurance? So these are the questions that come to my mind. Maybe he is buying insurance for any political adverse consequences that might befall him.
Okay, I think Ms. Kumaramangalam, a quick counter from you from what the other two panelists have said, and then I'll move on to Mr. Dua.
You know, Mr. Modi is not somebody who makes statements off the cuff. He is a very measured man, and he doesn't, as you know, unnecessarily come out with his opinions, etc., especially after becoming Prime Minister. There is a huge amount of pressure always on the leader of any government to make a statement about various things. Ours is a democracy where every single person has an opinion, and they think they are the ones who are right. Now, everybody has that right to do so, so they are like that. Occasionally, when he does come out with a statement like he did the other day, I think it was, he must have had his own reasons. We cannot speculate as to what they were.
Okay.
But I don't think Mr. Modi is at the moment looking at merely the political gains that he may lose or win. He is also looking at a long-term vision, which is what he has been telling everybody for a very long time. I think we need to read the minutiae, the writing at the bottom of the page also, and understand that he's not in it for the short run.
Sure.
All right, he is looking at the long term. And we may agree or not agree on the so-called reforms or the changes or whatever it is. But the fact is that I don't think he made an off-the-cuff statement at all. Whether one agrees with it, whether one thinks he's wrong or right, that's a totally different issue altogether. I think we need to understand that he's an extremely deep man and a very competent man. So again, some may agree, some may not. But the fact is that as long as, well, we can say what we want, but as long as elections are being fought and are being won, I don't think anybody in the BJP would say that the voters are fools. If we did, then we would be the fools.
Okay,
and
sure.
I don't think we are. So I think he made a very measured statement. Perhaps only he really knows the reasons behind it. But what we must acknowledge is that he's not playing, he's not in it for the short term. It's a long-term thing.
Okay, sure. You know, Mr. Dua, that also suggests that there could be more such bold steps in the days to come, and he's gearing up for them and getting the people ready for them as well.
Maybe, but I don't think with 7 provincial elections due between now and the 2019 general elections, that there would be any major measures, and they call it political reforms or political measures, which are in the offing. What the government has to be really coping up is the consequences of the 2 major measures, demonetization and the GST reform, how to get those going. And to my mind, GST was always recognized as a major policy reform measure, introduced 7 or 8 years ago in Parliament, then opposed by BJP, now in the government. Because in the short run, the global experience has been, there has been disruption whenever we've introduced our destination-based value-added tax of the kind which we have now. So the government, by hurrying up with it, within 6 weeks of the GST Council taking a call, and then on the 1st of July getting on with it, realized that the time available to it before this next round of elections start is not too much. So let's get going now that we've got the opposition, including the Congress, on board. The demonetization, I would call that as a measure, something similar to the various number of times devaluation was done in the country. You know, I would have called Jamindari, abolition of Jamindari a reform. The liberalization, globalization a reform. Devaluation or kind of demonetization, etc. are one-time measures meant to achieve a particular goal at that point of time. Demonetization, yes, was a bold measure. Whether it was designed to benefit our political party and defang the others is something which we will keep surmising about all the while. But the fact of the matter is it has had short-term or near-term impact which has been adverse. But going forward, what the Prime Minister said yesterday, he was recounting saying that we will get a money trail, tax, people, you know, can't now evade taxes, avoid taxes, etc. All very true. But I think it was done for a purpose, and that purpose will probably get achieved. GST going forward, we are all keeping our fingers crossed that when would the disruptive effect of it will be over and we get into the positive one.
Sure.
And that is certainly, again, and I think all political parties recognized it.
Okay, fair enough. You know, taking the discussion forward now, Mr. Iyer, you know, your party has seen several reforms in the past and has been responsible for several economic reforms as well. You know, some have worked, some haven't really. What has the experience of past governments been as far as economic reforms are concerned?
If economic reforms are designed to promote the growth of the economy or to reduce inequalities in the economy, and that is the sincere objective, then even if there is a short-term price to be paid in political terms, it is well worth taking that step because the people recognize that it is designed to give them a benefit. That is why we thought that a really important step would be the GST. But we recognize that the GST will have to generate adequate revenue, which means this coverage would have to include products like petroleum, products like alcohol, products like real estate, products like electricity, which are revenue generating. And therefore, we included them and were aiming at having a GST that would be probably just a single tax with perhaps another tax for excessively luxury items. And the lower tax would be in the range of about 15 to 16%. The minute we saw that so many products were going to be taken out of the ambit of the GST, we recognized that they would have to have much higher rates in order to keep the matter revenue neutral. And I was one of the 3 members of the Congress appointed to the Rajya Sabha Select Committee, and we pointed all this out to the government. There's nothing new in it. We told them this is what is happening. There's a perfectly good bill already prepared, which had been presented by Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee a few years earlier. We said you take that. If there's some one or other point which you want changed in that, we can consider it. But they didn't. They rewrote the bill, and they rewrote the bill in such a way that they created for themselves a whole series of mistakes. And now, when they correct their own mistakes, they say what great people we are. I mean, this is a silly way of running the economy, that for 6 months, you have approximately 6 different slabs, and then you take all the items out of 28% and say, no, that's going to be left at about 50 items, the rest will come under. But then what happens to the revenue? And why is it that the biggest reform that was propagated by Arun Jaitley, the finance minister, which was to change the fiscal year from April-March to January-December, and was supposed to have taken place within 30 days of today, why has that been dropped? It's dropped because the government doesn't have any money. So they daren't present a budget in January, but they'll have to present it by the end of February. And then let us see what a laughing stock they make of themselves, because they've deprived themselves of sources of revenue, and their claim that these things are going to improve will be as nothing compared to the actual achievements of the previous government in exactly these spheres in the past 10 years. He's boasting today that his GDP growth rate has grown by 4 or 5%. Well, look, we were in an age where 7% was long crossed. we were in an age when Manmohan Singh took the economy to 9.4%. And everybody thought it was credible that we would go into double-digit figures. And here we have a finance minister who's boasting about his failure to reach even 7%. And if we don't reach 7%, where is he going to give employment to our youth? Where is he going to promote poverty alleviation? It's all very well for Ivanka Trump to hand over to Modi the credit for what Manmohan Singh had done with respect to 140 million people being raised above the poverty line. But
I'm going to make the points that you're making.
To have a combination of Ivanka misinformation and Modi misdoing as economic policy for India, and the man beats his chest and says that I'm ready to take the consequences.
Okay, let Ms. Kumaramangalam reply. Okay, Look, you know, the people of this nation have shown tremendous faith in Prime Minister Modi over the last 3.5 years, Ms. Kumaramangalam. But are you somewhere concerned that another demonetization-like exercise might just prove counterproductive?
Why do you think there's going to be another demonetization?
Maybe another big-ticket reform.
Well, when Mr. Modi asked for votes from the people of this country, he had said that he would bring in reforms and that some of them may be upsetting. People voted for him despite that. Indian voters have traditionally showed a lot of trust in the people they voted for, regardless of which party it may have been. I don't want to make this into a petty political discussion where, I say everything that the Congress did was bad and everything we did was good. Both governments have, on occasion, both have made mistakes. Now, the point is not, it's not our egos that should be coming into play at this point. The point is that there were certain reforms which were done before, especially by Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was not Prime Minister, when Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister. And while I may be pilloried for saying this, it is a truth. But in the last 10 years, that is before 2014, yes, the economy grew. Nobody is saying no. But then, and 140 million people were not lifted out of poverty all at one time. It was over a period of time, about 20 years or so, if you look at it carefully. But again, that's not the argument. The argument here is that Mr. Modi made that statement knowing fully well that he has come up with certain, whether you want to call them reforms or, policies or whatever it is, that have upset a lot of people and that he may perhaps have to pay a political price. He made it very clear that he is not worried about that because he is not worried about merely being the Prime Minister, but what he wants to probably do is pull us kicking and screaming if necessary into an era where India can actually enter the Global Committee of Nations. We have an enormous amount of potential. You can't do everything in 3.5 years. 2014, we're just at the end of 2017.
Is 2019 in the bag?
Of course, I think it is, but then you will call me prejudiced, which is fair enough. Huh? But, well, if you go by voting statistics, and seriously, Indian voters are not stupid. They don't vote only with their hearts, they think about it. Now, at the moment, we're only looking at what we talk about, which are economic reforms or policies or whatever it is. But as the chairman of the chairperson of the NCW, I saw something which nobody had the guts to do before, the triple talaq issue, which is again coming up today, and which they say the government is going to bring a law in to ban it. Now, that's not a poll-winning tactic at all. It is something that a lot of people believe in. Every woman in this country, across the board, will say that personal laws are extremely animous, a very, how do you say, not, I wouldn't say just, it's not just animosity that personal laws have, they're just very unfair to women.
So it's not just economic reforms, but
it's not just economic reforms.
Bold reforms have been taken by this government is what you're saying. Okay, sure. Yes, Mr. Dua, you had something to say.
No, all that I was saying is, I wanted to say is, going forward, minor reforms, implementation issues would capture, the political space. And those would probably be somewhat corrective, remedial to the major measures which have been taken to, so to say, soothe the edges which have been kind of come up because of the policies. But at the end of the day, every reform, I reiterate, has a political cost. Otherwise, we wouldn't be really calling them reforms per se. The entire exercise is how to shorten the period of disruption and get going with the positive impacts. Because as was been pointed out earlier, reforms are meant to achieve a particular goal, hasten the pace of the economy, in inequalities, and prepare the economy for that short, rather than the short term going forward, medium term and others. And that's what's bound to happen. And if probably as a Prime Minister, he would have to pay a price in the immediate term as a party veteran or a party stalwart, but he is going to benefit rather than being paying a cost if these reforms are carried out in a proper manner.
Sure. You know, Mr. Bhattacharya, what has been done in the past to, you know, cushion some of these, the blow that has been provided by the economic reforms? What has been done? You know, maybe the governments have invested in the social sector after that, or, you know, what does history tell us?
Well, you know, I think even this government has responded to the challenges arising out of whatever reforms or economic decisions that have been taken. And any popularly elected government has always responded to the challenges. But if you permit me, let me respond to a question that what kind of hope this statement gives for the future reform. And my sense is, if the Prime Minister is serious about his statement, and as we have every reason to believe that he is serious, then I would say that this country can still hope for some of the much needed reform in the land laws and labor laws, which would definitely will cause some political costs to be incurred by the government, because these are difficult reforms. When you are introducing flexibility in labor laws, when you are allowing easier acquisition of land, which this government actually brought in ordinances not once but twice but thrice, but they were defeated because there was a political opposition to that. Now, if he means by this statement that he is still open to introducing land reforms and labor reforms, I would say this will be good news for the Indian economy.
You know, quick closing comments now. I've got 2 minutes left on the program, so I'm going to try and slip in as many closing comments as possible, starting with you, Mr. Iyer.
He has said what he said. It is evident that he wouldn't have said it if he wasn't apprehensive. And I'm glad that he is a little apprehensive, because the fact is that he has good reason to be apprehensive. And I expect a change of government to take place in 2019. And I just wish to remind your viewers that nobody in March 2004 thought that Sonia Gandhi would be able to beat a true giant like Atal Bihari Vajpayee just 2 months later. Not even Vajpayee believed it, which is why he brought the election forward. And yet he got defeated. So I do not think the 2019 election has been decided today. It is going to be decided in May. And then we will see that the 31% who voted for Modi in 2014, whether they will remain in some form or other.
Sure.
But if the other 69% or a large proportion of that get their act together, then Modi will be history. And that is what I expect to be able to say when you invite me here back to the studio in May 2019.
Okay, great. We'll wait for that day then, May 2019, and see who stands to benefit on that particular day. But before that, Ms. Kumaramangalam, you know, the bold decisions that the Prime Minister has been able to take, is it also because of the fact that the opposition is in doldrums at this point in time, and that's why these bold decisions can really be made?
Let me put it another way. The bold decisions that the Prime Minister has been able to make and has taken is also due to the fact that he got a thumping majority in the Lok Sabha. The opposition being in doldrums is not really the BJP's business. It's their business. If they can get their act together, well and good for them. If they can't, well, that's again their problem, not ours, not for us to worry about. For us, what we are interested in going forward is seeing that we are able to deliver on the promises that we have made. We may not be able to do all of it in 5 years, because that's impossible. Humanly impossible, politically impossible. But going by the reaction that we still have today, of course, the opposition will be very happy to see us lose and anticipate it with a lot of keenness, which is fine, which is part of politics. But from the BJP's point of view, and primarily the Prime Minister's point of view, the fact is that he understands the grassroots pulse extremely well. He's a man who's come up from the grassroots. He himself comes, as everybody knows, from a poor family. He understands what people think.
Sure.
He has an extremely good understanding of what the grassroots wants or may not want, the protests they've made, etc. In response to what may be said about the GST and the changes we have made, well, I think we need to appreciate the fact that the government is in touch with people's feelings and is willing to make corrections sometimes.
Because that's you know, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture because we are out of time today. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. See you again next time.